In the 18th century, in a Europe not yet fully illuminated by the flames of the Industrial Revolution, a peculiar profession emerged in the cold and damp corridors of the castles and mansions of the nobility. While kings and queens pored over matters of state and palace intrigue, a silent, nearly invisible figure played a crucial role in royal comfort: the royal bedwarmer. This craft, as bizarre as it is fascinating, transports us to a time when luxury and discomfort coexisted in surprising ways, and where the line between servitude and privilege often blurred amid silk sheets and down comforters. Imagine yourself on a freezing winter night at the Palace of Versailles. At the height of the reign of Louis XIV, the Sun King, the gilded halls and meticulously manicured gardens contrast with the stark reality of the royal chambers when the sun sets. The penetrating cold invades even the most opulent rooms, and it is in this scenario that our protagonist enters the scene: the royal bedwarmer, a position as unique as it is essential in the French court. The function of this server was simple in theory, but complex in practice. Hours before the monarch retired, the bedwarmer would slide into the royal apartments, carrying with it a large metal structure known as a warming pan. This utensil, a kind of giant frying pan with a perforated lid, was filled with hot embers from the fireplace. With precise and careful movements, the bedwarmer would slide this apparatus between the sheets, moving it from side to side to evenly distribute the heat. The process, which could last up to an hour, required not only physical strength but also extreme delicacy. One false move could result in disaster: singed sheets, burned mattresses, or in the worst-case scenario, a fire in the royal bedroom. The pressure on this employee was immense, as any mistake could cost not only his job, but potentially his life. But what led someone to accept such a peculiar and risky position? The answer lies in the complex social web of the time. Being a real bedwarmer wasn't just a job, it was a position of trust, and surprisingly, of some prestige. The bedwarmer had access to the monarch's most private quarters, a privilege reserved for very few individuals. This proximity to royalty could open doors for advancement in the court hierarchy, making the position highly coveted among palace servants. The selection for this position was rigorous. The ideal candidate would be discreet, reliable, and, above all, resistant to cold. After all, while the monarch enjoyed a warm bed, the heater spent hours in freezing rooms, exposed to the same low temperatures he sought to combat. Not surprisingly, many bedwarmers developed health problems over time, from simple chronic colds to more serious conditions like rheumatism. History presents us with some notable names who occupied this position. In the English court of the 17th century, a certain Samuel Pepys, famous for his diaries that offer a unique glimpse into life in London at the time, mentions in his writings the figure of the royal bedwarmer. He describes with fascination and a touch of envy the elevated status of this servant, noting how he had access to information and gossip that circulated in the highest circles of the court. In France, during the reign of Louis XV, a bedwarmer named Etienne de Lantier gained notoriety not for his diligent work, but for an incident that nearly changed the course of history. On a particularly cold night in 1757, de Lantier, perhaps distracted by rumors of a conspiracy against the king, left the embers for too long in one spot on the royal mattress. The result was a minor burn to the monarch's leg, an incident that, although minor, caused an uproar at court. De Lantier escaped execution but was banished from Versailles, his name becoming synonymous with incompetence among palace servants for generations. This incident leads us to reflect on the peculiarities and dangers associated with this profession. The bedwarmer not only dealt with the constant risk of accidents, but also carried the weight of responsibility for the monarch's physical well-being. At a time when the king's health was closely linked to the stability of the kingdom, ensuring a comfortable and safe night's sleep for the sovereign was a task of national importance. Furthermore, the role of the bed heater went beyond simple thermal comfort. In many European courts, these servants ended up taking on additional functions, becoming involuntary confidants or voluntary spies. Their presence in the royal chambers, in moments of vulnerability, such as the hours before sleep, placed them in a unique position to observe and hear things not intended for ordinary ears. This duality of functions, serving and observing, made the bedwarmer an ambiguous figure in the court structure. On the one hand, they were low-level servants, carrying out a task that many would consider menial. On the other hand, they held a subtle power based on knowledge and proximity to the center of power. It's no wonder that many monarchs developed complex relationships with their bedwarmers, a mix of dependence, trust, and sometimes suspicion. The practice of heating royal beds was not just limited to Europe. In the Ottoman Empire, for example, there was an interesting variation of this function. In the Sultan's harems, young female servants were sometimes assigned to heat the beds not with hot coals but with their own bodies. This practice, although fundamentally different in nature and ethical implications, demonstrates how the need for thermal comfort transcended cultures and manifested itself in different ways in different courts around the world. As we moved into the 19th century, the bedwarmer profession began to decline. The Industrial Revolution brought with it innovations that made the heating process more efficient and less dependent on manual labor. Hot water bottles, safer and easier to use, began to replace warming pans. Later, the advent of electricity and the development of electric blankets would mark the definitive end of this peculiar profession. Yet the legacy of bedwarmers persists in surprising ways. In some European monarchies, such as the British, the title Royal Bedwarmer still exists, although it is purely ceremonial. It's a fascinating reminder of how traditions can survive far beyond their practical usefulness, becoming part of a nation's folklore and cultural identity. The story of royal bedwarmers offers us a unique window into the complexities of life at European courts. She illustrates how even the most seemingly mundane tasks could be imbued with political and social meaning. More than that, this story reminds us of human ingenuity in the search for comfort, even in times when technology was limited. Reflecting on this extinct profession, we are led to consider the drastic changes in our relationship with comfort and technology. What once required a dedicated server and hours of preparation can now be achieved with the simple push of a button. This transformation not only speaks to technological advances, but also to profound changes in social structures and expectations of comfort and privacy. The figure of the royal bedwarmer also invites us to reflect on the nature of work and service. At a time when we debate intensely about automation and the future of employment, the history of this profession reminds us that human work has always been subject to radical transformation. Professions emerge and disappear, shaped by the needs and technologies of each era. Furthermore, the unique position occupied by the bedwarmer in the court hierarchy offers valuable insights into power dynamics in monarchical societies. She demonstrates how access and proximity to power could be as important as formal titles, and how even the most humble roles could carry significant political weight. From a health and well-being perspective, the obsession with heating royal beds also reflected the medical concerns of the time. In the 18th century, it was widely believed that cold and damp were the main causes of disease. Therefore, keeping the monarch warm at night was not just a matter of comfort, but of public health, considering that the king's health was seen as closely linked to the health of the kingdom. It's interesting to note how this concern about nighttime heat contrasts with modern sleep practices, where a cooler environment is generally recommended for optimal rest. This shift not only reflects advances in our understanding of sleep physiology, but also transformations in our expectations for comfort and the technologies available to control our environment. The story of royal bedwarmers also leads us to consider the stark differences between the lives of royalty and ordinary people at the time. While monarchs enjoyed warm beds and personalized service, the vast majority of the population faced harsh winters with much more limited resources. This disparity was not just a matter of comfort, but a reflection of the deep social inequalities that characterized monarchical societies. When we examine this profession through the lens of social history, we see how it fits into a broader pattern of elaborate personal services that characterized court life. From food tasters to royal dressers, the existence of such specialized roles speaks volumes about the ritualized and hierarchical nature of courtly life. The gradual extinction of the profession of royal bedwarmer also marks an important transition in the history of privacy. As societies evolved and notions of personal space transformed, the idea of having a servant manning the royal bed became increasingly anachronistic. This process reflects a broader shift in attitudes towards intimacy and personal space, especially among the upper classes. From the perspective of the history of technology, the trajectory of the tools used by bed warmers, from warming pans to hot water bottles, and finally electric blankets, offers a fascinating microcosm of technological evolution. Each innovation has not only improved efficiency and safety, but also fundamentally altered the relationship between people and their home environments. As we approach the conclusion of this exploration, it is impossible not to reflect on how something as seemingly trivial as warming a bed can tell us so much about an era. The story of royal bed warmers is, at its core, a story about power, privilege, innovation, and the changing human expectations of comfort and service. Looking to the future, we may wonder, what are the modern equivalents of real bed warmers? What professions or services today will seem equally bizarre or fascinating to future generations? In an increasingly automated and connected world, how will our notions of personal service and comfort continue to evolve? Perhaps in a few centuries, our descendants will look with equal fascination at our current preoccupations with personal climate control, optimizing sleep through apps, or extreme personalization of our home environments. The story of real bed warmers reminds us that what we consider normal or necessary is always subject to change, shaped by available technologies and the social structures in which we live. Ultimately, this peculiar story serves as a vivid reminder of the constant human search for comfort and the ingenuity we employ in that search. She invites us to look at our own lives and question what are the bed warmers of our time, those services or technologies that we consider indispensable, but which may one day become curious relics of a not-so-distant past. Thus ends our journey into the fascinating world of royal bed warmers, a profession that, although extinct, continues to fire our imaginations and illuminate surprising aspects of human history. May this reflection inspire us to look with new eyes at the conventions and practices of our own time, always aware that what seems ordinary to us today may one day be seen as extraordinary.